Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. Today we're with Dr. Marcelo Peredo, and he is the CEO of Sapien 9.
Thank you, D'Angelo, for having me here. My name is Marcelo Peredo, and I'm the CEO of Sapien 9. Been around for the last close to 4 decades, and I'm very happy doing cybersecurity, helping folks out there to get with a better security posture and ensuring that we all, embrace AI as if we don't, you know what's going to happen. AI is going to be,
Mhm.
all over us. So thanks for having me, D'Angelo.
Of course. Yeah, I agree. I think like AI is like the second coming of the internet. And what I mean by that is everybody is going to have to adopt it in one way or another, or you're going to kind of be with the dinosaurs in a way. Which you're doing with your company is seems like you are helping the cybersecurity side of AI. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your company and exactly the clients that you help.
Yeah, certainly. I think you said it best. I mean, if folks are thinking about AI and say, well, I'm just going to take my time and let's see what happens, or I don't really feel that AI is good for us. Well, it's one of those things that unfortunately it's here to stay, and that the sooner you embrace it, the sooner you're actually going to be caught up with what's going on, and it's changing very fast. I knew a few years back when I saw what they were doing with LLMs that it was going to be a big impact, and so I decided to actually embrace and start a new company, a fresh cybersecurity company with the AI spin on it, with ensuring that we embrace AI as we solve technical problems in cybersecurity. Sapien 9 is one of those companies that was born in to really navigate the AI world and focusing on cybersecurity that is pretty much needed this day. I mean,
Mhm.
as companies deploy AI in their different functions, very few people realize that AI itself is actually technology that needs to mature and that it brings a lot of footprint or digital footprint to organizations that needs to be protected and covered. And
Mhm.
somehow, that sometimes is learned the hard way.
Mhm. Now, what type of security risks does AI come with? Because traditionally, you see a lot of companies, they'll even use just like the normal chatbots like ChatGPT, Claude. What security risks do those have, as well as maybe using autonomous AI inside their business, having access to data and files and whatnot?
Certainly, I think you can look at an AI platform with the traditional cybersecurity view and look at the frameworks that were in place before, and the applicability of those controls are still there. I mean, a good 60 to 70% of those controls still apply. Now, there are new aspects of AI that of course, we all learn. And as we start using more and more, and as we start seeing enterprises use AI more and more, we're seeing some of those vulnerabilities. So, for example, the simple fact that folks go in and put privacy information in an LLM that is public, or you put PII, or you put anything or in intellectual property in a community LLM, large language model, that doesn't mean that it's going to stay private. It means like you're feeding that LLM information that it's probably going to be used and spit right back out if somebody asks the right way or if somebody decides to use that data. And so those
Hmm.
are some of the things that we've seen, some of the basics. Some of the more complex things that people don't realize is that imagine for the longest time with cloud and with systems, we protected all those systems and the perimeter and those demarcation points where people interact with those systems. And we were
Hmm.
very cautious, zero trust came about and system designs really took in consideration all those different micro aspects of every interaction with other systems and with other customers. AI came along and said, well, let me deploy agents. And some of those agents have privileges that, no one's watching. It's like letting that guest into your house and say, well, yeah, you seem to be a nice guy. Just go around and,
Hmm.
feel free. If you're hungry, go get yourself something to eat. And if you feel like, poking around stuff, don't worry about it. I trust you. My safe is in the basement. Go ahead. You have privileges. Well, that's not a good thing, right? I mean, and then you have other folks within your organization empowering agents to do the same thing and no one is watching. And so that would be kind of the other side of the spectrum where, you know, people are starting to realize that, deploying agents is a good thing, but it needs to be managed. It needs to be monitored. It needs to be secure. we also see some aspects of AI that are a little bit dark, right? I mean, like
Hmm.
you hear all these stories of people interacting with places or AI sites in which they're actually getting spiritual guidance. They're getting companionship. They're getting,
Hmm.
this, I'm gonna say, relationships with LLMs or with chatbots, and
Hmm.
it's no, it's not supposed to be that way. You're not supposed to be,
Yeah.
kind of bonding with an artificial, you know, being, and
Yeah.
I think there is danger to that because there is a lot of
Hmm.
consequences that come from there, right? I mean, we've seen
Yeah.
especially vulnerable people doing things as a result that in some cases were fatal, I mean, to themselves and perhaps even to other folks. And that's really dangerous. And we've
Yeah.
seen how companies are actually starting to react to those liabilities, right? In which, now when you ask the wrong question, hopefully the safeguards will say, well, let me just take a pause on that. I'm not going to encourage you to go that way, or I'm not going to give you that answer that may reinforce what you're looking for, uh, and be a little more responsible, more ethical in what I provide back as as a response. So those would be some
Hmm.
of the aspects that are not necessarily cybersecurity related, but cybersecurity touches all those aspects, and
Hmm.
good deployments of AI need to have good ethics, good controls, good governance. And somebody was saying AI is evil. Well, it could be, but like any other technology in the past, it depends what we make out of it, right? So, kind of getting that angle and that vision on harnessing AI the right way is very important.
Yeah, I think you said it great. Even on like the cybersecurity aspect of things, and even in the real world with people bonding with these, you know what I mean, these AI, these chatbots, very scary stuff. And I'm glad that we have people like you that are obviously taking a lot of precaution, right, walking towards it. Now, before we dive more deep about your company, I think we should step back and kind of talk about your background, right? I believe doing a little bit of research for this podcast, you were the very first CISO in the city of San Jose. Tell us a little bit about how that came to be, what your role was back then, and a little bit of your journey leading up to, starting your own company.
Yes, thank you, D'Angelo. That's a great question. I think that it goes back to my teen years when I started looking into personal computers slightly, pretty much ahead of folks, and I'm dating myself, but the
Mhm.
majority of folks, and embracing how PCs were going to change the way business were conducted by building networks and building databases, and later on through the dot-com developing applications on the websites and making sure that solutions were provided. And then of course it evolved to a point where malicious actors started taking advantage of some of those institutions that were vulnerable. And cybersecurity kind of became one of those vacuums in the industry, which, I went back and I did my doctoral degree in cybersecurity for that reason, saying, well, a bachelor's in computer science, a bachelor's in software engineering, or sorry, a master's in software engineering is good, but I think I need to really focus on cyber because that's where the world will need the most support. And sure enough, I was able to really dive into a lot of the details of cyber, a lot of the, I'm going to say, very technical aspects of cyber that, only with a lot of time, with a lot of energy, a lot of people get into. And that actually led me to becoming the CISO for the county of San Diego. I spent several years in Southern California as the CISO for the county of San Diego, which is a very large county and has amazing applications and a large number of folks that actually um, support the county using those applications. And then the city of San Jose kind of caught my attention, moved a little bit north in California, closer to Silicon Valley, and supported the city of San Jose as the CISO, number one CISO. They didn't have a CISO before. And that gave me the unique opportunity to build a cybersecurity program from the ground up. So they had literally very little. They were doing security pretty much organically without any policies, without any procedures. And we came in, built a team, created an ecosystem, created all the policies, the frameworks, embraced zero trust, embraced the risk management framework, really brought NIST to every corner of the city of San Jose, over 600 applications. And, proudly, I can say that I took the city of San Jose from 0 to 60 in very little time. And it's one of those very unique opportunities. Then I started looking at AI as a potential, I'm going to say high impact technology. And I was right. I mean, you move forward to today, AI is really touching every aspect of what we do. And that prompted me to start Sapien 9. Sapien 9, and most people would say, why Sapien 9? So Sapien is really about Homo sapiens. We are the wise humans, and that's what sapien means in Latin. And then 9 is because we're on our 9th revolution. So if we go back far enough, we have revolutions such as the ability to actually do agriculture, the ability to create democracy, the tools, and all these high impact technologies, the Industrial Revolution, the internet, those are considered impactful revolutions. And we're in the 9th one of those revolutions, which is the artificial intelligence revolution, in which we're creating synthetic knowledge, and that is going to, I mean, it is actually impacting significantly, and it's actually going to change the way we do things, and we just start getting started.
Yeah, so you started Sapien 9 kind of around like the AI boom. I know AI's been around for a long time. And then we started seeing these language models come out, I believe around 2022. But I would say everybody didn't really start using it until 2024. That's the time where everybody was talking about ChatGPT like, hey, you got to use this. If it was from teens, children to adults to old adults. So around that 2024, and that's when you started Sapien 9, right? What did you see coming that made you go, okay, it's time to build my own thing. It's time to fix this problem, and I know a solution, to this.
Certainly, and you're absolutely right. So AI has been around for a long time in different forms. Essentially, going back to the 60s when we started automating certain things, that is considered AI, right? And when you go on, and you're right, in around 2021, 2022, we started seeing some of these big impacts with transformers and large language models. And that was really a pivotal moment, and people started thinking of how we can actually apply those things. And cyber was no different, right? I mean, in cybersecurity, we've been doing things for a long time, and we've been doing it in the traditional frameworks, methods, and tools until we figure, all right, let's harness the power of those capabilities that AI bring, and let's take a look at how we can actually apply those technologies to all the things that we know how to do, how we've been doing them. And so the biggest impact is probably in reading all the telemetry, the data, and actually making sense of it. Imagine a security operations center before AI. People will get overwhelmed with a lot of those notifications that systems or platforms would provide on, milliseconds or seconds, hundreds or thousands of data points coming in, and making sense out of that. So traditional tools would go and, try to make sense of it. The better tools would say, all right, this is related to this. Let's connect them together and let's try to make a story of what's going on behind the scenes. But it's even then that folks started getting overwhelmed. There's the knowledge or pretty much the standard knowledge that SOC folks come in to their shift kind of fresh, and then go, oh my God, I need a break, a long weekend break, because of all that data coming in. So then AI tools came in and said, all right, well, let me make better sense. Let me kind of take that human approach to analyze things, and let me actually try to automate some of those responses at scale. So instead of having let's say 4 or 5 human beings looking at those data points, now you can have, AI agents actually doing the same thing. We don't want to take the human out of the loop. We want to keep the human in the loop, but some of those transactions in which the certainty of something is very high, let's go ahead and take care of those, right? It's one of those that, there is a little bit of a gray element in here that we want the human to look into. Let's raise that flag. So now at scale, you can actually be a lot more productive with agents. And so the ability to respond has gone up, but also malicious actors are taking advantage of the same thing. So if before, you were able to socially engineer someone by sending, I don't know, a voicemail or a text or an email, and crafting that text or that email, now you can do that with AI at scale as well. So it goes both ways, right? And we're seeing some of that. I mean, I heard of another incident recently in which somebody was socially engineered to provide a password, and that really, let the bad guys go in through the front door. I mean, if you give your password away and somebody creatively makes you give your password away, there's no technology that's going to help you there, right? I mean, potentially maybe multi-factor authentication will save the day, but even if in those cases, malicious actors are able to figure out a way to actually bypass multi-factor in some cases. So it's a tough world out there. AI could be used for defending, but also malicious actors are using to take advantage of vulnerable companies out there.
Yeah, I think you just touched on a subject that a lot of, when I address the elephant in the room, or I ask a lot of the guests that I have on about AI, is AI good in the cyberspace, right? Could it be used as a defendant, rather not just as an attacker? They always say, you know what I mean? It's too early to say, but I think they never brought up the point of how these social engineers can use it to socially engineer emails or text messages that might look a little bit more valid or a little bit more legit to, you know what I mean, ultimately harm not only companies but consumers. We're seeing on the consumer side of things of people when it comes to, like maybe cryptocurrency, hacking into their wallets and stuff like that. So I like that how you brought up that perspective up, because I don't think a lot of people are talking about the social engineers of things. Now, talking more about your customers when they come to you, right? When a company calls you and says, what's usually going on? What's the problem or the fear that makes them say, you know what I mean? We need Marcelo.
Yeah, usually is a little bit, after something happened, right? Or, the pain points have gotten so bad that they actually reach out. And in the event of an incident, it's not really only technical after an incident. It becomes a legal issue. It becomes a communications issue. It becomes about liability issue. And so that's where, people reach out and ask us to help them. And the way we help them is first, of course, in the technology aspect, we want to know what happened. Forensically, we want to determine how malicious actors were able to do what they did and provide that information to law enforcement. In a lot of cases, law enforcement is overwhelmed and they don't deal with everything that you throw at them. But in a lot of cases, they will use that data point, correlate that with other potential victims and find patterns there. So it's a good thing to interact with law enforcement when something happens. In terms of the legal support that we provide, is we tell them, look, you may need to inform not only your customers, but for example, California law states that you have to tell your consumers within 72 hours that something happens. Not only that, but you have to inform the attorney general, and you have to let them know that a breach occurred and the circumstances in which they occurred and what you're doing to fix. If not, now you're liable. You're actually breaking California law. And so, third, internally, you must ensure that all your departments, all the people know what to say, how to react when perhaps the media interacts with other employees, so that you're not doing what a lot of companies do when this happens, right? You're giving them bits and pieces, and then at the end, credibility of the organization is gone. Nobody believes them anymore. They think that they're lying. And it's not necessarily the case. It's just that they did not have a good communication plan in place, and they didn't have the right folks advising them on how to tackle the communications piece. So as you can tell, it's not just the technical aspects, but it's the legal aspects, the liability aspects. And finally, they may have insurance that covers some of that. But if you take the wrong steps, insurance companies are going to say, well, you actually didn't really protect the things that you were supposed to protect. You didn't react the way you were supposed to react after the incident. And now you want us to pay for all of that. Well, sometimes it's not that easy, right? And so we help them prevent some of those things and to minimize the risk and to actually do the right things at the right time, given the circumstances. Now, there are other aspects or other customers that come in based on what they are seeing around them, right? You mentioned cryptocurrency, you mentioned the potential vulnerabilities around that. One of the things that most folks are not even paying attention to is quantum computing. And with quantum computing, the risk is that one day, and Google said 2036 up until not too long ago, maybe a month ago, they said, well, it's going to be 2029, which is only like a few years from now. And then I hear other sources say, no, we're a lot closer to that day in which quantum computers will actually break encryption. And that's called the quantum day, right? And the way it will happen is that some malicious actors will actually get a hold of very powerful computers, quantum computers. They will take a node out of the blockchain and they will go at it until they break the encryption. And once they do that, well, imagine all those wallets, all those Bitcoins, all those banks, anything that they can actually get a hold of, they can. And so that is a scary day in which we can potentially get significantly impacted as governments, as countries, as institutions, and that could create a lot of chaos, right? And so what we do is we help provide a quantum readiness assessment, or QRA. We partner with this company called Isara that provides the technology to go into an organization and look at every mechanism for cryptography, and we assess the level of protection that they may have, and we go in and provide a roadmap to fix those things based on risk. And in some cases, we provide paths to adopt algorithms that are post-quantum computing algorithms, meaning NIST has approved about 5 algorithms so far that are quantum resistant algorithms, and I'm sure there will be more. But not everyone is aware of that, and not everyone is embracing the new algorithms, and they need to be widely distributed, widely adopted before actually the malicious actors force us to do that. And I might say, in some cases, it may be as simple as, all right, I'm just going to change that certificate here, and we're going to go from one that it's potentially vulnerable to a post-quantum algorithm. Perfect. Done. It's available commercially. Doesn't take a whole lot. But in other cases, you may have a custom application that is using an algorithm that it's not as easily replaceable, and it might take a new version of this, one of most important applications that you need to survive or to operate, and that might take months. So you got to be prepared. You got to have compensating controls. You may have to actually respond to an incident very quickly, and you may have to think on how you're actually going to respond in case something happens, or put some of those safeguards in place so it doesn't happen. And so it's not as simple. It's not a straightforward solution. And that's where we bring value, right? We not only bring the ability to assess where a company's at in terms of the quantum readiness or the quantum day, but we also provide a roadmap on how they can actually fix, implement, and
Yeah, so I think that talking about the quantum day, to a lot of the viewers, it sounds like doomsday, right? Something very scary. Now, could you maybe walk us through, like, once you're working with a client, what does that actually look like, and what are you doing with them day to day?
So as you can probably, if you take the time and look at the different services that we provide, there are several aspects of cybersecurity, right? I mean, customers may have a range of needs. And so one of the services that I mentioned is the quantum readiness assessment service. We also talked about AI and the ability to actually implement AI and secure AI. But there are other aspects of cyber that our customers benefit from, and that is, for example, audit and compliance. Some folks may have the need to be audited externally to keep in business, like SOC Type 2, FedRAMP, and so forth. GDPR is a big one. And so audit and compliance is a big aspect of what we do. Risk assessments. Folks may say, hey, we just got breached. Let's understand where else we are vulnerable, and let's assess the risk in the organization before the malicious actors do. Training. I mean, we were talking about how, for example, folks get social engineered to provide a password to malicious actors. Well, that's a training issue, right? I mean, if somebody calls you and somehow finesses you to provide a password, that's, a training issue. You should never provide a password to anyone, even if the CEO or a very powerful person in the organization says, well, I need your password. Well, sorry, that's a policy. We're trained not to share passwords with anybody, and it doesn't matter who you are. I'm sorry. And that's a training issue. So we provide training to folks at scale, right? I mean, some organizations require by policy to be trained at least once per year. We say, well, that's not enough. You need to train them at least once a month. But training and a checkbox is not really the objective. It's really preparing your workforce to actually not be victims. And that's when you actually say, all right, now we're better off. But you still need to do training for the people that are on board, for the new guys, and for the guys that have special privileges. So it's kind of not a straightforward and simple solution, right? Then we also have a little more technical aspects of our services that deal with architecture. A lot of folks are building SaaS solutions out there, and they're investing significant amounts of money And they want to know, are we building it the right way? And so you need to bring in an architect and say, hey, are you doing the proper tiers? Are you doing the proper layers? Are you implementing zero trust properly? And if the answer is, well, we're going to do that later, that's okay normally. But when you look at that infrastructure investment, you don't want to do that later, because one decision can actually be significant. You can be impacting months of for significant technologies that need to be in place, and you didn't factor in the cost, things that you would take months to recover from. So some of those aspects of building or bringing a cybersecurity expert that knows about the architecture and how to create solutions that are secure is super important. And the other aspect of medium-sized and smaller-sized organizations is that they don't actually believe that they require a number one guy, and I'm talking about the CISO. And I'm with them. CISOs are expensive. Sometimes, it's hard to find the right fit for to begin with, and a lot of times, that number one guy is not really in tune with what's going on with the organization, and it's really more of a friction point rather than an investment or somebody who's actually helping the organization. So for that reason, what we bring in is the concept of a virtual CISO or a fractional CISO. You bring in CISOs with the right experience. If you're in the healthcare space, you may want to bring a CISO that has high trust or HIPAA compliance knowledge, that has a proven track record, and you don't want to hire a person and find out 6 months that it's not a good thing or it's not the best fit. You may want to bring somebody just in time and for the right job, maybe for an external audit or maybe for building that application. And that's what we provide. We bring in the right CISO for the right amount of time and the right quantity and for the right technology. And that significantly lowers the risk for organization to adopt or to embrace a number one guy in their organization to be part of their team. And so as you can see, different customers, different needs, and we try to accommodate. And because we believe that every customer needs to know that they have a partner and they want to be treated like if they're the only customer, we go the extra mile and we tailor the solutions and we say, look, we're not going to pigeonhole you into one service. We're gonna do what your company needs, what's best for your organization at this time, and we're gonna tailor it for you. And that's what we take pride on, to bring in the right folks, the right solutions, the right partners to come up with the solution that is required for you to move on to the next level.
Brilliant, brilliant. Now, you guys are kind of entering a new market. Now, cyber is nowhere near a new market, but AI is. And I'm guessing that you guys have to do a lot of educating. And what I mean by that is a lot of your clients might not be maybe problem aware or solution aware. Can you tell us a little bit about how much you have to educate the market? A lot of business owners, they see AI and they see an opportunity and they just say, okay, we're going to go with it without seeing really any risk, right? I know that probably keeps you up at night. How much educating of the market do you have to do? And is almost every client that kind of comes to you doesn't really know, like they're not really that problem aware that they maybe think they are.
100%, D'Angelo. And it, our industry is not one of those industries in which, people go and get the service or the product based on perhaps a perceived need. And in our case, folks invest or call us after perhaps a lot of interactions, a lot of push, perhaps almost forced to, because no one, and I've been around for a long time, no one says, well, we really need more cybersecurity here. That MFA thing, I love it. I mean, I wish I could have more MFA in my environment. No one does that. It's one of those things that most people don't see the value of cyber, and you almost have to, like you said, educate them and prove to them that there is value. And the industry has changed. If you think back, probably in the early 2000s, you'd have to convince folks that cybersecurity was important because otherwise really bad things would happen. It's still true today, but now people almost see the value because they're seeing what's happening to their competitors, right? I mean, it's like, all right, we don't want to be that guy. That guy almost went out of business, or maybe that guy went out of business and that guy ended up paying a lot of money, or, our competitor got hacked all over the news. I don't want to be that guy. So a lot of that education is taking place organically. But nevertheless, I think folks don't just say, hey, Marcelo, you look like a nice guy. Come and help us. It takes a lot of interaction. It takes a lot of, poking around and and getting, that feedback, that warm and fuzzy, that trust, really is building that trust. And I'm going to say it's even a little bit more than trust. It's building that authority. Because, I can tell you one of the reasons that I got my doctoral degree is exactly that. Because when I used to say things, people would just ignore me. I said, why are they ignoring me? This is reality. And I thought to myself, maybe if I become a doctor and I tell them, they will probably, listen to me more. And, there is some truth to that. But I would think now more than ever, the difference between a service provider A or service provider B is trust and authority. Who actually has been around long enough or builds that trust or represents that authority to say, you got to make sure that, you deploy AI, you got to put a good government or good governance in place before you start having all those agents that are going to, come back to bite you in a legal way, liability way, or, perhaps even as a breach. And so I think that, like you said, it's one of those things that a customer will probably move very cautiously for those reasons and will probably select the right partner after several interactions, after poking around, and after making sure that it's not just, I'm going to say those folks that learn something and then just lift and shift and they repeat whatever they learn somewhere else, right? And there's place for that. Those that's what happens with large organizations. They create a service and then lift and shift, and they do it 100 times, but they come out of that framework and they're lost. I think the value is to be versatile. The value is to understand, to customize, to tailor the solution, and to make sure that you're actually bringing value to your customer on day one.
Now, we sometimes see in the cybersecurity space that some people they just want to check the boxes, as we say, right? They want the bare minimum. They don't really see the importance of it. All they do is see the price tag of it. Now, just to kind of show the importance of it, if a company ignores this stuff and completely ignores what you're saying and just gets it totally wrong, what's the real world cost of actually what's on the line?
Great question. And so I would say a few things. I think the first thing is that the notion of compliance and security being two separate things is out there. Some people say, well, if you're compliant, you're not necessarily secure. And there's some truth to that, right? Because there's a lot of people that, let's say, I'm going to train my staff, just as an example. Check, I train them once a year, they're all trained. Well, the objective is not really to check that box. The objective is for your employees to actually be smart enough not to click, not to respond in a certain way over a phishing attack, or not to be, social engineered. So did you achieve that objective with that checkbox? The answer is no. And so, but, in terms of, to defend compliance, if somebody does the checkbox and realizes what the objective is, then you're actually getting to the second point where it is, yes, you're being more secure. And so, I think one doesn't, it's not mutually exclusive. One is a subset of the other. You may have compliance, but not necessarily be on your best security posture. And of course, if you want to be more secure, compliance is the beginning. You still have to do your due diligence. You have to make sure that those controls the objectives are met, and that those controls are actually efficient and they're actually meeting their objectives, right? And so that's a big aspect of a good program. Now, I'm going to say, in order to quantify the risk and in order to quantify what you're actually preventing or what you're actually safeguarding, there are several methodologies, right? I mean, the most widely adopted methodology is a qualitative base to risk, meaning when we talk about risk, we say, is it a low risk? Is it a moderate risk? Or is it a high risk, or it's critical? And then, depending on which methodology you use, it's really a component of the likelihood that the adversary taking advantage of that vulnerability and what's the impact. And then you say, all right, we're going to create a heat map and it's going to fall somewhere in that, range of qualitative, values. Now that doesn't give you a number. It doesn't tell you, you're saving $2 million. But there are other quantitative approaches. FAIR comes to mind, and it's an acronym, and I'm drawing a blank of what FAIR stands for right now. But I can tell you that it is a quantitative risk approach in which actually you derive the cost. And the cost is based on a lot of factors. It's your size of the organization, the actual vulnerability, the actual cost to fix. And those are probably methodologies that are utilized by insurance companies, because an insurance company is not gonna pay, low, medium, high, or critical. They're gonna pay an X amount of money, and they have limits to it, right? And so when you take those qualitative approaches, it's a little more difficult. There is a level of subjectivity, but you can say, dude, if we don't put MFA on your 5,000 users that are coming in using the internet or using that SaaS solution, the impact will be that your application will be hacked, and this is what it's going to cost you to fix. Do you want to invest $100,000 in an MFA solution, or are you willing to lose about, I don't know, I'm going to make this number, $10 million, very likely in the next 12 months? Then the decision becomes a lot easier. All right. Let's put $100,000 to that MFA solution, because I wouldn't be here as a CEO if I made that. If somebody came to me with that clear directive, 100,000 or 10 million, and it's on me to decide. I don't want to be the one that said, no, we need to save $100,000 to save, $10 million. My head is probably going to be chopped if something happens and I took the wrong decision. And so that quantitative approach is probably effective in certain environments in which, those decision makers are perhaps, assessing whether an investment is good or not. And in some cases, it becomes a lot crisper when those two are presented the right way.
Yeah, I think that there's always an unseen ROI in protecting your company in cybersecurity. You might not be able to see it up front, but whoever you are working with, if they are competent, like you just said, like you yourself, you read the example you just gave, they're gonna be able to make you see that ROI. Would you rather spend $100,000 making sure all the data and everything is secure in your company, or pay $10 million in damages and fees and whatnot in the next 12 months? Most CEOs would say, I take the $100,000 and keep my job and my head on my shoulders, right? If you could give one piece of advice to business leaders listening right now about protecting what they built and AI, what would it be?
So I think the biggest shift that I've seen in the last 30 years has been, the growth of a CISO. A CISO and the role and how it has evolved has been an amazing journey. CISOs were not they were part of the C-suite, but they were not invited to the table, right? They were like, yeah, I got a CISO and I'm representing the CISO, I'm the CIO, or I'm, the CTO, and the CISO, no, he shouldn't be on this table. He's too nerdy or too geeky, or he talks stuff that nobody understands. So I'll represent him. So that has changed, right? Now, CISOs now are part of that table, part of that conversation. They're interacting with financial officers, they're interacting with CEOs, and they're actually interacting with risk officers to bring the overall risk down of the organization. And so my advice is that if you don't have that level of support from a CISO in your organization, you need to move in that direction, because the value right now is not a luxury, that it is existential. That CISO can actually bring that value for the organization to actually go to the next step, survive the next wave of attacks, and give you that peace of mind. And, so it's not really a luxury. It's an existential decision that you need to make. The other aspect of things is that, cybersecurity is not a company in one country issue, right? It's a worldwide issue. And I think that a lot of organizations right now have the luxury to operate in a country that has laws that are relatively, I'm going to say, I don't want to use the word relax, but they haven't changed that much. But if you go, for example, and think about GDPR, those laws actually can go after a company up to 5% of their yearly revenue. And so if you have a large organization and you're thinking, oh, maybe I should not invest in cyber, well, they don't need to wait for you to actually get a breach to go after you legally. They can actually go after your money if you're not doing the right things. And so I think that's something that may start changing in the United States, in that, legally right now, folks get in trouble when something happens. But I see another regulators are thinking, well, that's too late. Right now, there's a lot of teeth with cyber insurance companies. They won't insure you unless you prove to them that you're actually doing the right thing. And that's before anything happens. And so I think we need to shift from that idea that, well, it's an option and I won't do something until I'm pressed to do it, versus we got to do something before anything happens. Otherwise, we're already liable, and we're already, starting, not in a good state. So those would be my two pieces of advice. Get a CISO and be proactive.
Brilliant. I think that there's a lot here that these enterprise or mid-market companies can learn, right, about security. Now, Dr. Marcelo, if the viewers want to see more of you, see exactly what Sapien 9 is up to, where can they find you in the company?
Absolutely. Visit my website, www, and you can find all the contact information. We're building amazing partners across the Bay Area, across the country, and internationally. I think we're going to different cities across the world to support those mid-sized companies that are actually with presence in very important cities across the world, and we want to be there for them as well. So take your time and look at the service that best fits you. And like I said before, we can tailor to anything that you may be experiencing that needs support from us. Thank you,
Awesome, doctor.
D'Angelo.
What it was, like you said, it was awesome to have you on. I think they have gave us a lot of good insights about the dangers of AI and implementing it without thinking about the security risks side of things. So I'm glad that we had you on. And guys, we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Talk to you later.